35 years ago, the free return idea worked pretty well for Apollo 13 after their oxygen tank exploded on the way to the moon, giving them the chance to beat long odds and survive to tell about it. And the problem occurred not in one of the most difficult segments of the flight, but in one of the most benign phases, pure coasting flight with no rockets firing. Experience suggests that in any endeavor, you are most likely to encounter trouble when you least expect it. And that was certainly the case for Apollo 13. Many people ask NASA why they named the flight Apollo 13. After all, 13 is considered by many to be an unlucky number. NASA said they weren't superstitious, they were scientific. NASA still says they're scientific, but they've never put 13 on any flight since. After World War II, as many of you will remember, Werner von Braun and some of his German colleagues immigrated to North America and worked on modifications to their wartime V-2 rocket, trying to find a way to fly higher and higher. Physiology researchers started putting animals on those flights, the beginning of life in space. The commander of Apollo 13, Jim Lovell, loves to tell the story about one of those flights. He tells it something like this. Down at White Sands, New Mexico, atop the launch pad, a dilapidated old V-2 rocket. You could hear the countdown. 2 minutes and counting. Oxygen vapors were spewing out the side of the rocket. Inside the nose cone, 2 mice strapped tightly in their couches. One was quite worried. Perspiration coming out of his whiskers. His tail was switching back and forth. He looked at his companion and said, "You know, I'm scared. The rocket could blow up. This parachute could fail. A mouse could get killed doing this kind of work." His buddy asked, "So why do you do it?" He said, "It's better than cancer research."
Mr. Armstrong, I do realize that when you were on the moon, you had very little time for gazing upwards. But could you tell us something about what the sky actually looks like from the moon, the sun, the earth, the stars, if any, and so on?
The sky is a deep black when viewed from the moon, as it is when viewed from cislunar space, the space between the Earth and the moon. The Earth is the only visible object other than the sun that can be seen, although there have been some reports of seeing planets. I myself did not see planets from the surface, but I suspect they might be visible. The Earth is quite beautiful from space and from the moon. It looks quite small and quite remote, but it's very blue and covered with white lace and, of the clouds, and the continents are clearly seen, although they have very little color from that distance.
What about the sun? Could you see any trace of the corona?
No, the glare from the sun on the helmet visor was too difficult to pick out the corona. The only time we could see the corona was during an eclipse of the sun from the moon. That is, when we were flying through the moon's shadow and could observe the solar corona peeking out from behind the moon.
Looking at the photographs that you brought back, the colored photographs of the moon's surface, it seems that the color of the surface actually varies according to the angle from which you see it. Is this so? Does it do this?
Yes, it certainly does. It's a characteristic that we observe first while traveling around the moon in orbit. You could see that at the terminator, at the boundary between the black part of the moon and the lighted part of the moon, it was as if you were looking at a television set with the contrast turned to full contrast, very black and very white. As you moved further into the light, there were more and more shades of gray. But as you moved further, such the sun was higher above the horizon, you actually start to see the tans and browns appear, although at a very low level. Similarly, on the surface of the moon, the same characteristic is evident. You can see browns if the sun is high enough. Apollo 12, for example, landed while the sun was only 5 degrees above the horizon. So when they arrived, they saw no browns or tans anywhere, only fairly high contrast grays.
But you did?
But yes, I did. The sun was at 11 degrees. And Apollo 12 did also the next day when they arose from their sleeping period and the sun was higher. Of course, then the browns were observable to them.